Really starts with where's my land? What do I want to do with it? And then who are the people who can help me? If you have a commercial piece of property, it's not easier to subdivide than it was before.
But on average, is this like a 10-year process?
So those you can do pretty dang quickly, right? Aside from that, if you're actually building, you're looking at 6 months to a year to put ADUs on a property, to go through all the process and do the work.
So let's say that I want to subdivide my piece of property today.
Yep.
What would be step one? Who are the people that I need to talk to, and who can help me with something like that as well too?
So couple things to consider. One, why are you subdividing it, right? Mm-hmm. Because depending upon why, it can have different answers as to what we're going to do about it. But it will also depend on if you're in an incorporated city or in the county, right? So every property is regulated by a governmental agency. Some governmental agency is responsible for every piece of land. If you're in an incorporated city, you're going to go to the city. So, for example, Oxnard or Thousand Oaks are incorporated cities. If you're within the boundaries of those, you're going to go to City Hall and talk to the building and planning department and say, I want to divide this property. What are the rules? What can I do? And that's for your starting point. If you're not in an incorporated city, then the county is who you're going to go to. So again, the county has a building and planning department that you would go to start that process of, I own this lot in Ventura County. What can I and can't I do with it?
After I go visit the county, what are they going to request from me to determine? And then before I go there, you said, why
Correct.
Would you want to subdivide it? What are some of the different reasons why people would want to subdivide their land?
Generally to make money. Right? I mean, honestly, in most cases, the division of land is developed, right? And so bringing it to the highest and best use with the maximum occupancy available. So you have to look at the zoning on a property in order to determine what kind of subdivision you can get. If it's commercial, you're looking at one type of options. If it's farmland, you're looking at one type of options. If it's residential, you're looking at one type of options. And so depending upon the zoning and the goals, you're going to have multiple layers that you're looking into in order to figure out what you can do. If you're building new homes, say you have a tract of land, you got 20 acres that you want to turn into a 40 home subdivision. Mm-hmm. Well, that is regulated by the Department of Real Estate. So to subdivide for residential purposes, you're going to actually have to apply with the state. Not only are you going to have to get local approval, right? You're going to have to get state approval for that project. So consumer building has a higher level of consumer protection built into it. Whereas if I'm going to build a multi-level apartment building, right? First of all, what are the height limitations in the jurisdiction I'm going to be in? What are the parking obligations? Because parking is almost always your biggest problem when you're trying to subdivide, because generally parking is a requirement when you're adding scale. Height is a requirement. There's things called density bonuses where, because they want more housing. So if you're in what's called a transportation corridor, you can actually build higher and more and not have parking, right? So can you see there's like a gazillion layers to this? It really starts with where's my land? What do I want to do with it? And then who are the people who can help me, right? So if I want to build homes, I want to go find an architect, an engineer, people who work in this space to figure out what I can and can't do, right?
Got it. Now, what I was going to ask you, is it easier or harder to subdivide now with the ADU regulations? And is there because I had heard, and I've never done it, but I had heard that now any lot in California is subdividable, which maybe they always were at some point, but that it's supposed to be easier now to subdivide properties.
It's not as simple as that, but as a general rule, residential property can be subdivided easier than it used to be, right? So the rules that are in place are being created for the purpose of creating more housing because of the homeless problems and the lack of affordable housing, right? So if you have a commercial piece of property, it's not easier to subdivide than it was before. But if you have a residential piece of property, what would be zoned a single family residence, as long as it's not excluded. So there's some exclusions. If you're in a high fire zone, if you're in an area that doesn't have enough water, right? If you're not within a city district, you can't just subdivide your property. But assuming my home, right? My home's a tract home, right? So my tract home can now be turned into what legally would have been one lot. I can have one home there. I can now have 3 homes on that lot. And the rules are promulgated by the state of California in order to try and deal with our housing problem. So the city cannot deny me the ability to build those extra units. Whereas prior to these home development laws being in place, the zoning would have controlled. The state law actually overrides zoning, and the city has to what's called a ministerial approval. They can't look at my project and say no. If I meet the legal requirements, I get my project.
How long does a subdivision typically take? Because I talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna sell in 6 months and I'm just gonna subdivide my property, and then once I subdivide it, I'm gonna keep one and then sell the other one. How long does it typically take? And obviously I'm imagining that it depends on city, county, but on average, is this like a 6-month process, a 10-year process?
It's layers and scope. To add ADUs today, aside from there's prefab ADUs, right? So those you can do pretty dang quickly, right? Aside from that, if you're actually building, you're looking at 6 months to a year to put ADUs on a property, to go through all the process and do the work. In addition, as of today, most ADUs cannot be separately sold. California actually passed a law that says ADUs can be separately sold, but only if the local municipality passes a set of rules relative to how that works. And only one city in all of California has done that, which is San Jose. So unless you're in San Jose, you cannot sell your ADU today.